I'm happy to announce Marina Gržinić, who is a philosopher, theorist, and artist with a career spanning 40 years. She works as a principal research associate at the Institute of Philosophy in Ljubljana. She's also a tenured, or she has also been a tenured professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, where she heads the studio for post-conceptual art practices at the Institute of Fine Arts. Her recent publications include a special issue of Filozofski Vesnik entitled "The Body in the Field of Tensions Between Biopolitics and Necropolitics, Analyzing the Future of the Prosthetic Body in the 21st Century." Political choreographies, decolonial theories, trans bodies, and reactivating critical thinking in the midst of necropolitical realities for radical change. So I give the floor to Marina Gržinić in her virtual appearance here.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, thank you very much. I will share my screen to have a PowerPoint. So this is first. I hope you see my screen. Are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, yes. Are you seeing my PowerPoint fully?
Yes, we are.
Okay, super. Thank you for this, so that I know that the things are functioning. First, I want to say that I'm very sorry about what is the situation with Jelica Šumić-Riha, and I hope that my dear colleague will take and have a chance to take the things in her hands after what happened. But I start. Just a moment. I start actually with Jelica Šumić-Riha because I want to make this reference to what she exposes in the research project Reconfiguring Borders in Philosophy, Politics, and Psychoanalysis. And this was the basis and is the basis of our conference. And she exposes three perspectives: the political.
Marina, sorry, the sound somehow disappeared. Yeah, maybe can
Really?
Can you make it louder?
Louder. Is now better?
No, yes, that is better. Yes.
Yeah, maybe because I was a little bit, but okay. It's this better?
Yes,
yeah,
it's better.
Okay. Now I will scream because it's fully the volume. So I depart with this from this position that she exposes the three perspectives: the political, the philosophical, and the topological. And the idea of this research that is the basis of our talks is these structural investments that I quote them, and she emphasized them as volumes rather than coordinates, suggesting that borders are no longer seen as fixed points or lines, but as spaces that can expand, contract, or change. This is important because from this relation I follow two elements, and this is the Necrospaces and the Necrotemporalities. What I want to emphasize is that they shamefully simple connect the reconfiguration of borders with capitalism and death, because of this volume that I expose. So necrospaces can be understood as physical or symbolic spaces where life is systematically devalued, leading to conditions where death becomes a daily reality. This can include war zones, ghettos, prisons, and refugee camps, and we see this palpably all around us these days. And The other dimensions is necrotemporalities that refer to the manipulation of time in the context of necropolitics. And this includes the suspension of time. So the states of emergency is becoming key for the necrotemporalities, where the usual rules of societies are suspended and extraordinary measures such as extrajudicial killings or indefinite detentions are used. And I make here the relations to necropolitics because it's central also for my work, but it's central for understanding this volume, this necrospace and necrotemporalities. In which way? Because necro means death and politics that is connected. And what is central for necropolitics, coined by Achille Mbembe, is, I quote, contemporary forms of subjugation of life to the power of death. And in order to put this forward, three key procedures are central to necropolitics. And again, we see them completely in developed form in these days in front of us: the right to kill, enmity, and impunity. Necropolitics also can be seen in relations, and we have to make these relations to biopolitics, just to understand the cut that is done by necropolitics that was coined in 2003. Of course, we go back to Michel Foucault in the 70s, but only to actually show the main idea that I always put like a kind of a formula. And Foucault is practically saying in the 70s, biopolitics is make, live, and let die. Make, live for which spaces, territories, transpassing which borders, definitely for the so-called first capitalist world. In that time, welfare states, Europe is a very good case, the West Europe. And on the other side, I go back in necropolitics and I see clearly this change that is proposed with necropolitics. That means let live and make die. And if you look these two yellow small relations, it's a big, big difference from the welfare states of make living for the first world and let die. Doesn't matter what's going on in the second world at that time, the so-called today former Eastern European world or anywhere else, while today we have the difference. We have the let live and we have the make die. So if you can live if you can, but practically the war machine is the main thing that entered the whole relations. So necropower and biopower are inseparable concepts in this what's going on, and we think here about the state and the people who live or have lived there. So it's really a relations, necropower redefines necropolitics as biopower, Foucault showed to us, redefined biopolitics. And if I make a reference again to Foucault, society must be defended, a text from 75, 76. If I quote, Foucault states that the 19th century was a kind of possession of man as a living being by the state, a kind of nationalization of the biological. And in this context, he sees racism, to which I will make relations to necropolitics, as what justifies the death function in the economy of biopower by appealing to the principle that the death of others makes one biologically stronger insofar as one is a member of a race or a population. End of quote. So for biopower to function, which is suddenly a precondition for the possibility of the biopolitical, and this is very key, it is important that is accepted and embraced by the population. The population wants to be protected and wants actually those who are seen and presented through ideological mechanism being endangering their good life, they had to vanish. So necropower, on the other side, focuses on the negative goal of the control over death. As opposed, this control over death is not any kind of the thanatopolitics that we use in the European context. Control over death is actually implementation of the war machine. This is key. It's the whole structural envisioning of how to control death. And this is, of course, opposed to the positive goal of biopower. This is this control of life, but we see that the control of life here is actually controlling life, the population, and the reproduction. Moreover, it appears that necropower controls large populations through the management of death. So this is really key, as opposed to the individual executions of a classical sovereign. So it's also this disproportionality. And of course, the relations of controlling the populations through death, not to life, is something that we see definitely from 2003 clearly in front of us. David Theo Goldberg view expose, I quote, necropower can take multiple forms. The terror of actual death, or a more benevolent form, the result of which is the destruction of a culture in order to save the people from themselves. And we see this again very palpably with the refugees in this cynical, because it's a cynical saying, rhetorics that is used. Of course, Membe, that is the key element of the reference by David Theo Goldberg, says that necropower is the exercise of sovereignty in cases where the generalized instrumentalization of human existence and the material destruction of human bodies and population, end of quotation, is the central project of power. In the last instance, the shift from biopolitics to necropolitics must be reconsidered precisely in the zones of indistinguishability between the sovereign and life, between citizen and non-citizen, and between biopower and necropower. And these differences with which I enter is something that allows to make some very basic foundations to talk about necrospaces and to talk about necrotemporalities. And I pose a question: is there an escape from the necropolitical topography of injustice, in difference to the topology that is emphasized by Jelica? And I want to talk about migration, necrocapitalism, and civil bodies. So these relations between topography and topology, especially it's important to talk about refugees, non-citizens, and so on. Why? Topography is here the arrangement of the natural and artificial physical features of an area, because necropolitics also produce necrodeaths and necrozones and necrospaces. And actually, because of this, we can make this reference to topography because it's in relations to the refugees. And topology, on one side, it's just briefly to say, concerned with the abstract property of space that we know and forms applicable in mathematical and philosophical contexts, while topography is focused on the physical features and layout of land used in geographical and environmental sciences. And this topography here works definitely directly with the refugees and all what this implicates: asylum seekers, the productions of non-citizens. In the last instance, we are in Slovenia. Our state is based on what is called the erased people. So those alive but dead, because without any social possibility and to exist. And this started in 1992. Today, it's the whole situations of the erased people. At the beginning it was 30,000, today then it was 15,000, was never solved and really put clear by the sovereign state of Slovenia that made a necropolitical gestures in order to actually declare to be the successful story on the sunny side of the Alps. So how this now function? And very good example, old research by me. It was the first big mass deaths of refugees was recognized in 2013 in Lampedusa. And at that point, Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta said, the hundreds who lost their lives at Lampedusa yesterday, this was on 3rd of October 2013, are Italian citizens as of today. This is something of a cynicism, because why? The state funeral was less costly, and even less costly will be and was if they will be forced to return the bodies to their place of origin. But what is that we have? We have a situation where the dead body it's the guarantee of being a citizens. So having this in mind, at that point in 2013, the way how necropolitics and biopolitics function, it's very, very clear, because it's definitely possible to say that we have two situations. We have actually at that point the formation of a necropolitical citizenship. You get the necropolitical citizenship in the moment you are dead, for many different reasons, and on the other part you have the biopolitical citizenship. So necropolitical citizenship is given to those left to die, refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, whereas the EU citizenship is no longer an old form of natural citizenship, but only a biopolitical citizenship. And we see very clearly that recently, in the last years, it was for the first time that the West, the Occident nation states refuse refuse the citizenship for those who were born in the country, and they practically lost the citizenship that was almost a taboo topic and an impossible way much in the past. So if we just make a step into the biopolitic also through Gilles Deleuze, that is important because allows us to make also this differentiation going back to biopolitics. Deleuze talk about the disciplinary society. And he says already in the 90s that the biopolitics and biopolitical is coming out of the disciplinary society. That is the vast enclosures that lead from one closed space to another and connects each space with the law. But the disciplinary society, they actually came after the society of sovereignty, but the element of this society of that he envisioned, it's practically connected with processes that Deleuze is redefining. So he's saying we had the society of sovereignty, we had the disciplinary society, and what he sees in the 90s, making the analysis and quoting and researching Foucault in a very short text, is that he said that what is paradoxical is coming back of the society of sovereignty after the disciplinary society, in which way he see taxation that becomes one of the most important organization of production, then the rule of death instead of the administration of life. And these elements he recognized to be key after the Second World War, in the way that he said they are leading to a kind of a new formation or a transcending of the biopolitical in a way that we know from 2003 that we can term necropolitical societies, and in which the disciplinary society are not central but the society of control. And this is seen with also the implementation that will come immediately after this very important text. In 1983, we have the mass usage of the internet, and also the computer completely changed the whole way of understanding the elements of control. And Paul Virilio in that same period is talking about the free-floating control. So the apparent freeing of the disciplinary society between two incarcerations and the limitless deferrals of the society of control. Also, Balibar connect in 2000 practically the story that I tried to present until now, and he state to completely clearly the passport of a rich person from a rich country increasingly means not just mere national belonging, protection, and the right of citizenship, but a surplus of rights. And this is going back precisely to that biopolitical citizenship that is not just the unconditional rights to have a citizenship where you are born, and especially to the new form of the necropolitical citizenship, to which we can add this new kind of citizenship that is connected precisely with the structural position and also with the position in society in terms of money and power. So this necropolitical practically connects and color every level of relations. So everything what we theorize today about the status of refugees and asylum seekers, and also about citizenship, including the living conditions, must be seen through a necropolitical lens. So biopolitics is not enough, and though again and again, many attempts resist to think of the border space as a European biopolitical space that is undergoing major changes. So this is really strong, and if I make relations to thanatopolitics, practically it's just there like a leverage between biopolitics and necropolitics because of the resistance to think the necropolitical as the main logic that organizes the society and also the spaces and the time. It is also important that necropolitics works through measures of increased racialization. So this is another element. And here is not this racialization. It's not just the old racism. That means something pejorative and a slur, but new forms of the exploitation, dispossession, and expropriation of people or even states through the constructed category of race. Less disposable, less valued. The whole nations has to disappear. Afghanistan is a very good case. Practically is make die, not even let live. It's completely not important. So also the space change is becoming what I said in the beginning, a zone. We don't talk about just a border. This two-dimensional reference goes into a volume. So in that context, what this implicates is, as Eric Fassin and Marie Adam in 2015 are saying, this is all primarily a process of ghettoization. This space also is connected through these new technologies, through the idea of the society of control, to a new form of security government, And all this works with one idea. And these days we see this perfectly clear. The aim is to contain, deter, and expel asylum seekers, but not yet to expel them completely. So it's different formats. They are incarcerated, they are put in special camps, they are outsourced, like Denmark is doing this to Kosovo, Italy is doing this to Albania. Why it's not possible to definitely dispose them of their life and everything is because the Western Europe context cannot get rid of this idea of humanitarianism. And that means this humanitarianism that was proposed in the past is always there as a kind of a shield. So, but the way of the life that we cannot put out, so we cannot just talk about necrospaces and necrotemporalization, it's connected also with a very important element that I said. So it's linked to not taking of life, but is a path towards life, towards death. So, but not yet death. And this is called deading life. I will come to this point very soon. So, one of the main elements in what is said is perversity. And this perversity is in relation to law, because, for example, Sheila Ben Habib is very clear she is exposing through her way of research what is how is the position of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a text that was written in 2015, recuperating Sheila Ben Habib, by Christine Nodertoff, Mose, and Vera Wright. They quote Sheila Ben Habib saying very clearly that in 1948, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was negotiated and adopted, almost half of the world was under colonial subjugation and consequently did not form part of the United Nations General Assembly. So we come to this point of securitization, that it's even more important because allows us to understand really the way how this cynicism, then the racializations, the necrospace function, and it's very important how this is presented by Debarati Sanjal. Debarati Sanjal, she's saying, just looking the rhetorics, the boundless cynicism that is present into all these situations of securitization. So to make security one of the central elements of everything what is a part of the necropolitical capitalism or necrocapitalism, or if you want, of the situation of neoliberal capitalism, if you are in a way preoccupied by the too much intensity of death, because still we are all biopolitical bodies, very privileged, especially in the academic sector. So the Barati is saying the evacuation undertaken in the name of dignity, and I quote, showed bulldozers raising the makeshift shelters under the heavy police protection, while tear gas and water guns were fired at protesting refugees. So we see this aporia of border security practices, and we also see the status of irregular migrant as both a security threat and threatened life in need of saving. So this is really key. This how the this migrant or refugee today function, and how much is the position, the figure of the refugee violent, because of this double aporia that it presents, and also because it's absolutely in securitization, we don't talk anymore about justice, because justice is a lost cause in necropolitical capitalism. So this even would lead us that the whole idea, necropolitics put very clearly that the whole idea of protection, it's actually connected now not with rights, but only, as Sanjal is saying, with sentiments, moral sentiments and compassion and empathy. Even more, humanitarian governmentality, she argues, relies on the asymmetries of compassion rather than the reciprocity of justice and equal rights. And I already said very clearly what is the place of this justice. And in that case, the perversity goes even more in the past, because already in the 90s, though it was not the refugee crisis, it's a very important analysis by Lisa Markey, and she is telling in her analysis that asylum seekers are frequently positioned as speechless emissaries whose wounds speak louder than the words they say. This is becoming really key in understanding all these relations to the necropolitical, and even to the case that in one interview, a Bangladeshi refugee, and Sanjal is saying, doing this interview, he uttered, "We have to show that we are victims, pure victims." So the question is there a way out of the topography of necropolitical injustice? And it's quite some cases that make the things complicated. So first is that onto these elements or differentiation between the necrospace and the necro time or necrotemporalities that are central, and the volume that we get through necropolitics of how to think the social space, it's a very interesting and important relations to, in 2014, Kate Breckenridge, in his book, A Biometric State, The Global Politics of Identification and Surveillance in South Africa, 1850 to the present, he said and shows how the 20th century South African obsession with Francis Galton's universal fingerprint identity registry served as an incubator for today's systems of biometric citizenship being developed across the South. And we have this very palpable in the former ex-Yugoslavia, again to go to our space, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that is on the, let's say, on the border of existing on the border of a really a situation of the states falling apart. They were one of the first getting the biometric identity cards. And they are completely digitalized in regarding of these questions. So also it's interesting that Sanjal say, and we had cases, now this is becoming put under the carpet, but we have the situation of refugees using razor blades, fire, sandpaper, battery acid. In which way? They actually wanted to hide their identities. And that leads us even more to understand the measures in this intensification of the necropolitical. and also that humanitarianism is changed by security governmentality that do everything to get rid of the refugees, asylum seekers. This is clear an agenda of the European Union, and establishing these volumes of borders, and even more, everything is going in the direction of security governmentality that will actually be another level of the necropolitical. So the Sandral is referencing to the migrant as the harbinger of a politics beyond the exclusions of representation, visibility, citizenship, and human rights. And if we just try now to, because of time pressure that I was exposed, saying that we have to finish quickly, but still I put some things that are important for understanding the relations of the necropolitical to borders and to space. It's possible to say that since the summer and fall of 2015, the European Union borders have been a militarized border space. Now this is normalized. Nobody thinks about these things, but this is really evident. And they are emerging under neoliberal necrotechnologies. So I said the necropolitics can be added and has to be added to everything what we use as a universal, let's say, terminology, technologies, digital technologies. No, the drones are necrotechnologies. They have this very important function. And Nordentoff, Mosé, and Wright, they expose the militarization of the border space. In which way? Through two elements: a horizontal expansion of border control through agreements with countries of origin and transit countries. And we see this. No, the horizontal expansion, it's very clear with Africa and the European Union, where these countries that were first countries where life were completely endangered, today are seen as safe, and they are sent, the refugees are sent there. Recently, it's termed Afghanistan is completely saved, and big deportations are going on. This was exposed, I think, in the last 2 weeks. And on the other part, we have this vertical intensification of surveillance by drones and unmanned aerial vehicles. So this is really transcending over these two elements of the having like just the diagram, but is really a volume. Even more, in that situation, at the heart of this restructuring of hyper reconstruction of surveillance under the level of protection is the increasing militarizations that I already mentioned of the border under the shield of surveillance. And why does this matter? Nordentoff, Mosé, and Wright argue that the militarized border surrounding the European Union is termed as an area of justice, freedom, and security. So this cynicism is again coming back and really redefining what these spaces are and how they are connected with necro technologies. So when we put all these things, what do we have here? And I started with a reference to Jelica Šumić-Riha that is key for the rethinking and also this presentation, because she emphasized these changes already in the research project. And I said it's a volume rather than just a diagram, just something pro and contra, like a border, a line, because we see the three-dimensional space of control that has been widely implemented since 2013, and this is something that has to be even expand it more. And the thesis that I want to put is, because of racialization, because of the refugees, asylum seekers that are racially, colonially divided, we have to think in this context of the border, which is also a colonial border, when it comes actually to establishing the relationship between the European Union and its neighboring states. The border is, as Norderndorf Mose saying and right, the border is a permanent zone of exception. So in this way, space is in a permanent relationship also with the law, because law is putting this relation, how the zone of exception are established, how they work. So we see really a whole structure of the state working with the space and also reorganizing the border. So in this case, it's important maybe to say that this myth of the modernity time, the Habermasian and other researchers that took the empty center of power is a problem, because clearly misses the process of racialization that is there central. So we are not dealing in this case with an empty space, but with an obliterated space. This is the essential difference. So why? Because we have the death space. We have necrospaces, but they are even more landscape of death, so deathscapes. There, then we again can have the positions of dead in life, that is by the theoretician James Stanescu defined a vanishing life, a life that is not yet dead, but is in the process of vanishing. Again, it's this main characteristic of the dead in life is actually also the life of refugees. And why is this important? Because this is not just a zombie life. We will come to this element and say this is a zombie life, a living dead, but is a life that is under the systematic procedural pressure of death. So not yet dead, but actually going into that idea of vanishing life. And why not a zombie life? Because practically the life of us, these privileged academics, the neoliberal first world citizens we are all now of the European Union, it's practically important because in a certain way, we can say this is a depoliticized and a zombie life. And we are the living dead. We have no political agenda, and all these questions are under big problem. So the vanishing life of refugees is a political life under violent destruction, where the erasure of the fingerprints turns their own flesh into political flesh. So saying this and trying to connect all these elements of how the necrospace and necrotemporalities works with the idea of necro technologies, but emphasizing really the volume. Or if I could go on, I will talk about the sunken space that was a case in the film of Jonathan Peele, Get Out, where it's all these relations between not yet dead, but actually in the process of vanishing, and on the other side, connected with intensified processes of dispossession, racialization, and so on. So I think I will finish now, conclude, and will...
Okay, thank you,
yeah.
Marina.
It was possible to follow.
Sorry?
If it was possible to follow. I mean, if the PowerPoint was working, because I'm just, I want to be here clear.
Yes, yes, yes. It
Good,
was fine.
thank you. Yeah, because
Uh,
it was so changing the time and so on. But yeah, thank you.
no, no, no. It was very clear. Thank you. So let me open the floor to questions. Can you see the floor here?
Yes, I can, and I hear you very clearly.
Okay. So let me open the floor to questions. If someone has a question, immediate reaction to this. Rock.
Thank you, Marina. One thing that I was thinking about, the connection you made at the beginning, well, not the connection, but the shift from biopower to necropower, biopolitics to necropolitics. And I was wondering from this perspective of biopolitics, which Foucault, of course, develops as a certain historical shift. So from a certain other kind of necropower that was there before, so I'm wondering, is the contemporary necropower in relation to previous biopolitics or simultaneous biopolitics just in other parts of the world? So I'm wondering, is it a regression or what, or how did the biopolitical era influence the necropolitics we see today? Because probably it's not, we don't just go back in time, but the whole biopolitical sequence kind of probably in a sense produced this necropower, or am I thinking wrong about this? So this connection between bio and necropower, that's what I am trying to ask about. Yeah.
Yes, I can actually say that the biopolitical is not influencing the necro power or the bio power, the necro power, but is vice versa. And very importantly, the biopolitical, though it's true, it stays there because nothing is disappearing. We live in the context where all in a certain way that seems finished is still present. It's there. So the necropolitical and especially the necropower or the necropolitical it's functioning in such a way. If the biopolitical was that moment reserved and is still reserved for those, let's say, nucleus or parts of the sovereign states and also welfare states that infuse a big possibility that is less and less. It's just disappearing. But still, it states in Europe, because of their necropolitical measures, they can guarantee to a certain strata of the society a better life, a good life. And this was the idea of biopolitics. So to make life, and this is why also the biopolitical was supported by the biopower of the population of those who had all these privileges. They absolutely didn't want to lose them. But the necropolitical influenced the biopolitical in such a way that make life today, it's really going more and more in a big tempo toward the elements of let live. So it's not anymore. I think it's really key to understand these two small formulas, no? That when you think about that let live was before in the biopolitical, just the let was part of the let die. That means it was part of just leaving everybody, the second world, the third world, just out of the perspective of the first capitalist world. Today, we see clearly in Germany, we see clearly in Britain, where the whole system is falling apart. In Britain, the health system is even similar to Slovenian health system, thinking historically that is another history of capitalism. We have a very stampedo capitalism in Britain. You had centuries of extraction and dispossession of the colonies and so on. So in this way, I think the necropolitical and the necropower that use death as a direct way of organizing the population, it's really affecting the biopolitical and the biopower. And it's almost impossible, and never ever we will go back. That is also part of capitalism. You don't go back, but maybe you have nucleus of that good life, maybe. But in general, it's really evident this let live. And in this way, also, the borders are regulated. So this is also very important. Before, you had in the beginning of the 2000s, just to come to the point to understand in relation to the text, it was this welcoming of the refugees. What you have today? Today you have actually just absolute get rid of any refugee, and even more that is even more cynical. We had with Ukraine, when the refugees, there were people, citizens of Europe, that they will become, as it's to them promised. At that point, they were maybe from non-aligned countries, like it's the case it was in ex-Yugoslavia. And these citizens, not only students, like from race differentiation in the back, they were seen actually not to be the real citizens of Ukraine. So the first scenes that we have when Poland is opening the embracing the refugees is what? Is taking the white refugees, but not the others of any other color. And in that point, the European Union is absolutely not reacting to this. Well, just 1 month before, we have Black Lives Matter on every corner, and everybody is writing big endorsement of Black Lives Matter. So this cynicism and shows really how the border function. It's not about rhetorics, it's about direct interventions, and having 2 lines already, and pledging, for example, in Slovenia, our government, right wing at that time, said, finally, we have the right, our pure refugees, our refugees. So what was all the others produced through wars and so on, and also post-colonial subjectivities coming out of the colonies of the former West? They just disappeared in this story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Further questions, comments, interventions? If I can pose a moderator one, then can you elaborate a little bit more on the relationship between some aspects of contemporary capitalism and necrotemporalities and necrospaces that you create? To which extent is this, so to, in a certain sense, involve Foucault a little bit more into problems of, let's say, capitalist systems theory as such? Is it only about the management of the border, or is it about the systematic production, let's say, through forms of deprivation, the systematic production of death?
Yeah, I want, maybe I can just shortly state, it's not that I produce necropolitics and biopolitics or necrospaces and necrotemporalities. They are part of theory. And I made a reference through my research, so it's not my invention, but it's true that necropolitics is because of the biopolitical that is key for the academics in Europe. It's becoming a sanctuary, so they don't want to have relations to necropolitics. As I said, thanatopolitics, it's really here kind of intermediary position that try to leverage these relations. But the question on the other part is very interesting because here is not only about the border, and I try to be very clear about this. It's really about life. And these consequences of life are integral to the idea of capitalism, because it's obvious that capitalism in itself, in the politics of profit, it's actually now making bigger surplus value and profit through the dispossession of life and to the massive production of death through the military instruments. So in this way, the border, as I said, and the destruction, again, I use precisely topography, because if you look at Ukraine, the destruction of people and the destruction of the paysage, if you want, it's not something that we can just cut. It's really a volume of the incredible deathscapes that are coming out of capitalism that use death in millions as for capitalization and for profit. So in this way, I think we come, as we talk about the volume in space and not anymore about some kind of coordinates or line. Even that line is not just the border. As I said, it's connected with the colonial history, because all what we have today, the process of racializations, are going along the racial colonial divide. All what we see. Our refugees is white refugees. Anything else, it's not ours. So from whom they are? To whom we delegate millions of people. Of course, we delegate them to death. As I said, in Afghanistan, when the profit was done, it was the easiest way. So in this way, I think the elements that come into that necrospace and necrotemporalities, no? What is the in necrotemporalities? It's definitely the necrotechnologies that are used, the securitization. And securitization, it's nothing else than, again, targeting the lives of the population, dividing those who are seen as the population and all those who are seen not being relevant to the population. And it's in this way, it's also important to understand the complete artificiality, or also what Virilio said much in the past, the free floating. In that case, he was talking about security. But we can take this free floating on every element that we talk, but still we cannot just take these terms and these notions and serve them as we did in the 20th century, because they need to be, I always say, sustained by the necropolitical. So this is why I talk about necrotechnologies. What are other drones than this? They just kill. The collateral damages, but we see this every day. The collateral damages are just out, what we say, out of our thinking. Hundreds of people die with drones and bombing in order to get rid maybe of one, and nothing matters. Nobody is preoccupied. Nobody is saying anything about this. It's just normal. So maybe I try to connect different things, but thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. Any further questions? Then we can thank Marina one more time.
Thank you.